Hi, everybody, and welcome to Reed's Read Spider-Man Crawl Space Edition. Check us out at the SpidermanCrawlspace.com. Well, it's been a couple weeks, but I thought I would do a really nice little piece and just review the current storyline with issues 7 and 8, aka 901 and 902 of Amazing Spider-Man by Zeb Wells, and of course, John Romita Jr. back in the artwork to talk as now in the aftermath of the big issue 900. I use that term loosely. What is happening is the Vulture returns and Norman Osborn gives Peter a new deal and a possible new job and a new suit. So let's get into the pros. First of all, it does feel kind of nice to have John Romita Jr. back into it. I don't know what it's about his artwork. I know it's a very home feel, but I really do like how the fact he does the battle scenes, especially between Spider-Man and the Vulture. The Vulture just looks more menacing. While he looks his age, he looks very dark in areas. And considering the storyline and the motivation of how he thinks Spider-Man really kind of let his granddaughter know all about his past issues when, she could do something called Google and City Criminal Archives, or the fact that, back in Civil War, Adrian Toomes was forgiven his past crimes about, even though he had committed murder. But I really like the motivation because we actually see the Vulture being who he is. He's very angry, upset. He has to blame it on one thing. That's, Spider-Man calls him on about his pieces about what the story is and attacking Spider-Man. It shows how brutal it is. Despite all the years and the age differences between Spider-Man and the Vulture, Toomes can still be a very lethal person, but I also like the fact that Zeb Wells does use a lot of Peter's know-how, not only to save himself from the fall by cracking over his web cartridges to make big kind of like a shoot kind of parasailing, but also using his fix of actually aerodynamics and how the original Vulture harness works so he can actually steer the Vulture into it. And he actually is using his brains more. I also like the fact that, after everything that happens with Norman Osborn with the new suit and the job offer, that he really has to throw how the deal is with Peter, that he can't just remotely send it. He's not tracking him. It's not a little different than from what was happening with the Cyber Thweep suit back during Nick Spencer's run. I really like how it's put together about how this suit is supposed to run and exactly what is kind of the deal with Norman Osborn, as well as the fact that Norman is giving Peter kind of the two jobs. He can use the new suit at his own free will and to try to keep him sane and start to keep him away from getting on the glider, because as he admits, if he gets back on the glider, he doesn't know if he'll get off. And we already know from solicitation that the Golden Goblin, which will be about Norman Osborn, is coming back soon. So it's a really interesting thing how he's really trying to do that, Zeb Wells doing with the sins of Norman Osborn, which we know are in Ashley Kafka, and that's coming up pretty soon here with her return, as well as the Hobgoblin. So it's a really nice storyline and little pieces. But despite all that and the work being done in 2 issues and the motivation coming right off of the big issue 900 with Adrian Toomes, I'm going to go into cons. First of all, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, Mary Jane and Paul. Let's face it, this doesn't really get to because, of course, they're delaying the storyline. We still don't know what the big fall is, reason why Peter and Mary Jane are not talking to each other. Also, with the flashback scene in the one panel, we see Paul punching Peter, saying that's enough, as in Peter is more of the aggressor issue. That doesn't paint things good, and it also continues to kind of just degrade what the Peter and Mary Jane relationship is. It also puts in the pieces that to find out some of the missing pieces of the puzzle with Mary Jane as well as Maury McTaggart have to go into, of course, the X-Men stories. And we know Day of Judgment's coming up with the next issue here with issue 9, but a lot of the pieces of what we don't know, including who are those little kids, is tied to an X-Men event, which we're going to have to wait until next issue. Another thing is actually the Spider-Man suit itself. I don't get with the face issue and him doing the little funny things with the parses. I do like how the suit is able to work with how the actual glider works similar to what Ben Reilly's spider harness was. I also like the nano spider bots, which we saw, of course, back during the end of the Superior Spider-Man run with a new update. Why it's really good, and Peter actually uses the pieces as well as the parts of his know-how and the new suit to, of course, get the advantage and defeat the Vulture. There's just a lot of things that just don't work with the costume. Basically, it looks kind of a piece between the Parker Industries light-up suit and, of course, having the weird little emoticons on the face. That doesn't really make sense. The joke kind of falls flat when he's like, hey, Tubes, check this out. Oh, sorry, you're unconscious. I can't see what my new suit is. Why? Why have the different facial expressions on the suit? I'd understand if it has the different visions, and as we know, this is really the debut issues. We don't know how the new suit worked, but it really doesn't work, and it just looks kind of odd, even though there's more to the whole deal with Norman and Peter, both with a job and a new suit. I'm hoping we'll get more information as the other issues kind of roll out. The next couple of issues, though, Spider-Man's stuck in the Hellfire Gala, which will be with his Hellfire Gala costume, too. before we really get to see the costume back and suit because of this interruption before we finally do get to Dark Web here in the winter. So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of good things on the storyline, but like I said, the whole thing with Mary Jane, the whole thing with the suit, the whole thing with Paul, and a couple of things that are just being left open because I've got to make the mystery go longer, don't work for otherwise a pretty decently set up suit between the Vulture, Peter, and actually even exchanges between Norma and Peter. So I'm actually going to give both stories a B minus. I actually do like how the story is structured and what Peter is being more himself, more intelligent, actually using his experience to save himself and fight the Vulture and a couple other pieces, but the part with Mary Jane and supporting cast, as well as everything with Paul, still just completely fall flat. And despite we're not going to really get too much more with the current storyline with Norman for at least in our 2 issues, it doesn't work very well, the storyline, as well as when we know Norman's going to be wearing his own Goblin costume in his own series coming up in a couple months when Dark Web starts. So I'll give both issues altogether as a whole run a B minus. I did like it. The artwork was very solid. The storyline with the Vulture was very nice. But everything with the new suits and Mary Jane and Paul, flat bummer. So B minus, folks. And really, I don't have much more else to share with that. So I'm going to, of course, table that too before I review, of course, Amazing Fantasy 1000 here coming up next week. So you can see that coming up as I give a little piece on the Spider-Man stories as well as the parts of the anniversary Amazing Fantasy story where Spider-Man originally debuted back almost 60 years ago. So, and for that, guys, go ahead and check us out at the Spider-Man Crawl Space for most information. Big shout out to Pete and, of course, Dark Mark and everybody else who's been doing the reviews the last couple weeks while I've been gone from here. You guys have done an amazing, amazing job, Pete and everybody else, because you know you guys are the true winning reviewers. While I'm just a guy with a green screen, lights, and a degree that basically says I know how to do this stuff. But I do it because I love Spider-Man and I love doing these reviews. So, guys, see us out later on the SpiderManCrawlspace.com. Definitely check our upcoming podcasts and everything else. And I will see everyone later.